Hi, I'm Jesse Gilstrap.
And I am Drew Cordell, and you're listening to TV Binge Drinking, doing another mini binge on the newest episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian, episode 2, chapter 10, The Passenger. And I myself am sipping from the child mug on some coffee, Dunkin' Donuts coffee with a little bit of this skinny syrup mocha flavor, and it's actually it's not too far removed from a mocha cappuccino, so it actually tastes pretty good, and it's a little less boring than my usual black coffee.
There are some actually good options for a flavor that don't have any calories or sugar.
Right.
We have a lot more varieties of good tasting things out there like that.
Yeah.
But I myself am drinking on little Bones coffee,
Okay.
high voltage. I needed a little pick me up because it's been a sort of week where I haven't always been sleeping so well. So maybe I need that high voltage. And I'm trying not to sing high voltage every time I think about the name. But nonetheless, I'm drinking that with this little bit of Oreo creamer
Ooh, very nice.
because I definitely make my coffee desserts very often, and nothing says dessert more than something like Oreo.
That's right.
But yeah, drinking that in my ordinary Star Wars service, and think it'll be a good start to the day, and good thing to sip on while we're talking about this episode, my friend. So cheers.
Cheers to you.
So, as you said, I think talking about these names of episodes, if we're going to go out the whole spill is almost more of a mouthful. It really is more of a mouthful than talking about the Skywalker saga movies when you have to say Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which they kind of did away with the
Right.
recent movies. Technically, it's still there, the episode numbers, but they tried to make it just Star Wars, The Force Awakens. So,
Right.
in their nomenclature, it's an interesting trend. Do and want they people do and they don't want to have all that, I guess, naming convention that tells you that you're watching a long series.
Right.
It's like, oh, we don't want to remind them that this is episode 9. Studio thinking. Like if we tell them there's that much stuff, we just want them to come in the theater. We don't want them to be burdened with the idea that this is a long series, even though we're still calling it Star Wars and everybody knows Star Wars has a lot of titles. But there we go. Yeah, Mandalorian season 2, chapter 10, The Passenger. Here we are. Before we actually, I'm gonna pause this just for a second because I'd like to hopefully not do this too often, but obviously we're talking about this episode after a fresh watch,
Right.
and all these episodes this season will be done this way before time for reflection or looking up things or finding out things. I'd like to address some things about chapter 9, the Marshal, before we move too far forward.
Okay.
First of all, just to say, um, I discovered after just not long after we recorded the episode that W. Or Brown was in chapter 9,
Yeah.
and Western Kentucky's own, from a place familiar to home to us. Or Brown was also in Deadwood with Timothy Oliphant and playing bartender once again. It's cool to see him in an episode. Once I knew it was him, and I rewatched it later that day. It was like, oh yeah, I can tell it's him. And but I had no idea, it was him until after first watch, and he started making posts about it. But I thought it was cool to see him
Yeah.
in that dynamic again. I was actually expecting, like, I knew he was somewhere in the season, and as soon as I saw Oliphant, I was like, I wonder if Earl Brown's somewhere in here. But I didn't look behind the makeup, I guess.
Right. It was one of those things that like it totally clicked, like once I realized that once I saw the tweets he was putting out, and you sent me a message with like his Facebook post and stuff. Because the voice, I mean, yeah, of course, that had to have been him, the Weequay bartender. So, because I remember watching the episode and thinking, "Oh wow, this sounds really familiar." Yeah, it's just really cool to see kind of that Deadwood reunion, and there was also W. Earl Brown also kind of had another reunion with Oliphant and Justified, just to bring up Justified again. That's one of my favorite Justified episodes too, from like the earlier seasons, because W. Earl Brown is hilarious in it. I love that episode. It's really funny.
Yeah.
But it's just a real well written episode too. It's very memorable. But yeah, I really enjoy kind of that aspect of it. There were other things. Well, before I jump to other things that I noticed on my rewatch, I just to say more about W. Earl Brown, I really enjoyed reading his spill on Twitter about it, because it just, you could tell he was just so excited to be a part of Star Wars, and the whole story he kind of laid out, that really kind of touched me. It was something of course, us as lifetime Star Wars fans, you can relate to that, to like
Yeah.
just the idea of being able to be a part of it in a way more than just enjoying it. And that is really cool. Even, him being excited for this really small role in the long run, but tell it made a huge difference. And just him having to be quiet about certain aspects of production and everything, just really cool.
Yeah, and recording before Mandalorian had even been released yet, too.
Right.
So he didn't know anything about the show, just outside of what he had in front of him, which was very little because they're so secretive. But yeah, that was really cool to see, and seeing him, gushing, geeking out, was really cool. A couple other little things that I meant to mention and I didn't mention when we recorded. One thing I loved is I talked about the production and the look of the show and how much bigger it felt, and that continues in chapter 10 in terms of just a noticeable production value difference. But the expansion of the aspect ratio
Yeah.
during the finale, or during that whole climactic action sequence, was really cool and effective. So I enjoyed that on a stylistic level. And the other little thing uh, the smaller thing that I just thought was funny was I keep thinking about Monty Python watching this show, and whenever they were setting out the bantha bait
Right.
for our crate dragon, it made me think: is there a rabbit gonna jump across the screen at some point? Especially with them up on the cliff or whatever, like up on the hill, like looking down
Right.
at this cave. It's like, why do I keep thinking about Monty Python watching the show? But it keeps happening. Do you have any other chapter 9 thoughts before we jump in?
Just a couple of just I did kind of go back and look at the graffiti, and I think I saw Palpatine. I think I saw 3PO, and I think I saw a lot of like snow troopers. I didn't really get to take a long look, but it was kind of interesting. And also, I did not notice, and I don't know why. I was watching last week. I was watching upstairs on my smaller TV, and that might be why. But I also may have looked at my phone for a second. But I missed the little detail when Mando is going to find Mos Palgo, that on the way he ends up camping with some sand people.
Yeah,
I just completely missed that detail, so I just really enjoyed that little thing as I was rewatching it. I actually rewatched it last night, so uh, it was another cool little detail. And I guess, segue into this episode, one of the things I really enjoy about this week's episode is kind of that visual detail continues to be at the forefront of this season. And you mentioned the production value. The thing that stood out to me this week for sure was that there were just some really well constructed sequences, some incredible visuals too. And we've seen a snow planet before, a ice planet in Star Wars, but the look in this particular episode, it was distinctive in a way that it didn't feel like the same stuff that we've seen a million times. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I loved picking up where we left off. I guess I'm going to go ahead and get into some negatives because I'm a little frustrated with this episode. Um, it's directed by Peyton Reed, who, of course, directed the Ant-Man movies, and Bring It On, which just screams Star Wars. Though, but no, I enjoy him. I enjoy his Ant-Man films, for sure. I still wish we could have seen what Edgar Wright wanted to do, but that's another story for another podcast, I suppose. But um, I enjoy kind of his pacing of action sequences and the way he can kind of construct things resourcefully with the story. That's one of the great things about the Ant-Man movie, and I think in a sense it's the same in this episode too. I noticed kind of the same level of appreciation to those details, and I enjoyed that we picked up right where we left off, but I feel teased because ending with that shot of Boba Fett and then picking up where we left off, and then there being people trying to, assault Mando and the child and not getting that immediate payoff of a Boba Fett appearance. I get why. I understand, but it just feels I just kept expecting it, and it felt like I was supposed to be expecting it, and it never happened, and that kind of irritated me a little bit. I don't know, that might be, who knows? That might just be me, but I felt kind of cheated a little bit on that, but the action itself in that sequence was enjoyable, and I liked the little uh, jetpack deal. And another thing I want to notice or want to mention is that I could tell in the passenger, a lot of we've talked about the visuals in the series kind of hearkening to the original trilogy, and I think in this episode, not that we lose that, but in this episode, there's a lot more visual relation to the sequel trilogy. There's a lot more um, like creatures and races and stuff that we see in the sequel trilogy, or similar to things we see in the sequel trilogy. And I kind of enjoy that. Even, like my feelings on the sequel trilogy aside, visually, they have some amazing things. And I kind of enjoy kind of seeing that in this episode, whether it be, the character of Frog Lady or who kind of is similar to the frog priests or monks or whatever they are, that live with Luke, um, in Last Jedi, or the spider creatures, that kind of look like creatures that we see in Force Awakens that Han is transporting. And I don't think that it's the same creatures, but it's similar. And like I don't know the name of the race, but the Jawas that aren't really Jawas, that one that has the knife at the child's throat, being from, Force Awakens. I enjoyed those little details. I enjoyed that. And I enjoyed the little deal with the jetpack, and of course him using it, again, basically kind of doing the same thing he did last episode, where he makes a deal and then goes back well, it doesn't technically break it, but it ends up resulting in that person's death with the child just looking up and be like, you're so great. Which is kind of disturbing. Of the child just loves violence that much, but it's pretty funny. Um, I enjoy the X-wing sequence. I enjoyed the chase going through the planet that we end up stranded on. And of course Dave Filoni's back as Trapper Wolf. I enjoyed all those things visually, and the way that the action is executed is great. I mean, some of the best action we've seen, some of the especially when it comes to dogfights and stuff, it was really cool. Some of the best stuff we've seen on the show, and even Star Wars related in a while. So I really enjoy it. But this episode really frustrates me because we talked last week like, okay, they start off with an episodic episode. Are they going to improve on what they did last season and try to kind of make it a little bit more meaningful when we do that? And I think in a way that last week was definitely improvement on that, but this week, while I enjoyed this episode, it's very much, and I do think it's a strong episodic entry just in its pacing and everything, but it doesn't really add anything um, to the story. And yes, he's continuing. There's certain things that serve the plot, but it doesn't necessarily add anything. Like the frog lady is going to take Mando to this planet where her husband is, and he has some information about the Mandalorians. Just kind of shaky stuff that doesn't really go one way or the other, which I know we'll see maybe next episode, but there's nothing really character wise here. We get a lot of the child moments, him eating the frog lady's eggs, which is hilarious, and it's cute. It's kind of silly, but I talked about how I know they're going to have a lot more of the child stuff, and of course, here we are a week later, and there's a lot more of the child stuff just in this episode. But again, I feel like this is kind of just slinking back to the episodic nature of some of those episodes in season one, and while it's not bad by any means, I think at this point, not that it doesn't have to be episodic, but there needs to be a little bit more to these. And this one it's good, it's enjoyable, but that's about it. I mean, it's fun to watch, and it's slick, and it's got some really cool stuff going on visually. But that's kind of the extent of it. I don't really have too much to throw in because there's really not that much there. Other outside of the visual aspect.
I definitely understand that perspective, and to be honest, like I'm, like I said, we're earlier and before, like we're watching this really fresh, so trying to uh, get all of our thoughts together.
Yeah,
Is like sometimes you want to digest something before you are able to categorically say what something is, and this is one of those episodes that I feel like I might have enjoyed more than you, um, but I've still been on a little bit of a precipice figuring out exactly what I feel. Um, but still, like, here's the thing: I do think this was really strong in terms of considering where the season is or isn't going to go. My brain is still like, we're 8 episodes. Like,
yeah,
what are we doing? Like, let's move this thing. Uh, but I also enjoy the adventurous serial sort of aspect of it too. You know what I mean? Uh,
right,
you don't always expect something to advance plot, and one of the things we talked about in the episodic ones of season one, the episodic episodes of season one, we talked about like I don't necessarily need the plot to be advanced, but I want it to tell us something about the character.
Right, exactly.
If you don't advance plot, advance character. And this didn't do either of those.
No.
So on that level, I can understand feeling disappointed by this episode, but I also really enjoyed this episode. So this is the weird position I find myself in.
Right.
If we get to the end of the season and I'm like, gosh, how come we didn't do more with XYZ? Then I could look at this episode more and be like, this is one place where they could have spent more time doing this
Right.
instead of wasting time. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to judge it on its own terms too,
Right.
without considering what I want from the whole, and just look at this part and say, what is it doing? And I think what it does is a fun little adventure story. It's really well told. It has all types of cool details, like the X wings when you see like the tension of that, and the
Yeah.
starting to expand the wings, like oh gosh, like they're getting serious. What's about to happen? Kind of and and I also enjoyed the dynamic of them letting him go.
Right.
And how they do that by being like, I mean, they're being uh, not just the post Empire policing force, but they're also, I think, being out in outer space. If you're talking about, kind of the Western vibe, but that idea of the wild frontier, the big, wide outer space, you're going to have some element of leniency.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you're out in the outskirts, and you're going to be like, things are really diverse out here, and there's a lot going on, and people just trying to scrap by. So when they investigated Mando, like they determined that maybe they shouldn't take that too seriously, like that he's and actually put him under arrest, like they would blindly under just plain legal terms. So like I appreciate the way that story played out. And on a vague level, that suggests character because it shows you how the Mandalorian, how he's deep down a good guy.
Right.
It's not telling us anything new. It's not advancing anything, but there's some suggestion of his character in here. And also, like, we continue to get Amy Sedaris, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain about that. And also the idea of the child really liking frogs. And I mentioned this on chapter 9 as well, like how, like when they brought back the Sand People and we're back on Tatooine, and all these little details, Mandalorian relating to the Sand People. He's actually got some element of relationship with them, and knows how to communicate and bargain. That world building is really well executed, and on a certain level, I felt like this episode also continued that by not feeling like it's too separate from the world around that we've already been to. It feels like it's a part of the continuing narrative. Like, oh yeah, this is his continuing adventures, and we're building off of like the natural evolution of certain details. I really like that. Yeah, even on a humorous level, like you said, we're getting a lot more child action in this episode, a whole lot. So like nobody should have any complaints about the amount of time, the screen time that the child gets,
Right.
including his malevolence. Like he's enjoying the violence, and he's eating the future of the frog people. Like,
And enjoying it way too much.
yeah, he's very much enjoying it. That, like, the ending note of the episode is fantastic as well. Like, kind of looking over his shoulder, like, okay, she's asleep. Ow.
Right.
Like That's really well done. Funny little details. I want to also mention too. Peyton Reed is, I think, a really good director and a diverse director. Like you said, Bring It On, um, but also Down with Love.
Yeah.
I believe that's the name of it. I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe it's called Down with Love. Now I'm gonna have to pull it up while we're talking. But with Obi Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor himself in that episode, which makes me wonder, like, oh, is Peyton gonna get the chance to work on the Obi Wan series and
Oh, that would be.
direct Ewan McGregor all over again?
That's correct.
Yeah, Down with Love.
Yeah.
That I thought that was a really fun movie, and also shows that Peyton Reed is, really adaptable to different styles and clever and fun. And I enjoyed the first Ant Man film a lot more than I enjoyed the second one, but they are really well done. And that skill is shown on this episode. Like we mentioned, the production value and it's not that it was bad in season one, but it's just you can tell there's just that much more in season two in terms of what they understand about how to do the show.
Right.
And watching them fly through the clouds and stuff, like they're just like, holy cow, this looks gorgeous. That world looks gorgeous, really well done, and creepy creatures and all that fun stuff. On that adventure serial aspect alone, I really liked it, and obviously that's part of Star Wars.
Right.
And here we are in just this one little adventure, but I don't know. I'm just randomly thinking about it a little bit more. We'll talk about the Star Wars movies at some point in full, but one of my favorite Star Wars movies, Return of the Jedi, begins with an isolated adventure, but it very much advances the plot and advances character and does stuff within itself, even though it has that serialized aspect. It does something with it.
Right.
So if you're going to have fun and have this isolated adventure, it should be part of something more, I feel like. And simultaneous to that, Attack of the Clones has parts of it that I'm kind of like, why did you include that?
Right.
Feels really separate. Like, oh, we're just doing this just to have a little action beat, as opposed to it feeling natural. I'm trying not to get too deep into that conversation, so we can talk about it at some other juncture. But hopefully, you take my meaning. Like, that if there's a problem to this episode, it's the I wish it did more within the ongoing narrative, but I also enjoy it for what it's worth. It's fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately I kind of fall about a B plus with it because I think, of the things that the episodic episodes offer, I think what this does offer is just a lot of great, action that does feel distinctive and a lot of great adventure. And like you said, kind of that serial feel. And what it does with it is very good. I think just in those terms, I mean, that yeah, it does a great job. But with what it's lacking, it just, I mean, and I know it's still early in the season, but I just mean in this point of the show itself, it just like we've both said, it just feels like we need a little bit more. We needed to give it a little bit more than just a fun episode. And
But we also can't blame this episode individually for what it doesn't do in the larger scope.
that's true
So
too.
that's a complicated equation.
Yeah, that's true too. I before we, kind of wrap up, I guess I need to mention, and I guess I finally looked up how to pronounce Richard's last name, and it is Ioade or Ioade,
Iowatic.
and he returns as the voice of Zero, which
Yeah.
is manipulated by the Frog Lady to communicate uh, with Mando, which was a scene I enjoyed, and I was wondering why he was in the flashback or the previously. I was like, what? That character's coming back? But I thought that was kind of a uh, clever way to use to have them communicate. And I liked Frog Lady. I really hope that she has more than the name Frog Lady, but that's the that is the credited character name that we have right now. But I enjoyed her. I enjoyed the little, things with the eggs, of course, the child stuff. But I kind of like that scene where she finds the hot spring,
Yeah,
um, and goes and kind of takes them with her. I enjoyed that. Of course, that immediately leads to the spider creatures, and just to talk to them, talk about them a little bit more. I really enjoyed the design. Again, I think it looks more like stuff that we see in the sequel trilogy. And again, I think that's a good thing, like visually. And I really enjoyed how that whole thing played out. And it kind of feels like, well, it feels like an adventure, but it almost feels it feels like a monster movie. And being a huge fan of those, I really enjoyed that aspect of it too. I liked them kind of having to scramble to the ship, and it just felt like every time you think they were kind of getting a breath, way to escape, something bigger comes along. And
right.
that's something we've seen in Star Wars before too. But I've really enjoyed this variety of it. And it's just a lot of fun to watch.
I also wondered for a second if we were going to get the Star Wars version of Alien.
Right.
I thought, oh man, please don't burst out of Baby Yoda's chest. This could get really terrible here.
Right.
Yeah, when Frog Lady wandered down to the hot spring and so forth, that for a second when she first left, I was thinking, oh, come on. Really? Why would she leave on a strange planet?
Right.
And then when you actually see her, it's like, oh, okay, this has a logic to it, and I
Right.
do kind of understand that. Like it does make sense that I thought it was well done. I feel like a B plus is a fair grade for this episode too.
Yeah.
It, it's really good, and it's a fun, well executed episode. The frustration, a lot of it just has to do with where are we going in the larger narrative. But I also have to say, and speaking of where we go from here, we need more Doctor Mandible.
Right.
I want to know what's going to happen there.
Yeah. That'll be. I just have a feeling we'll be back on
More than
Tatooine
likely,
more.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like so much is riding on like in those characters, and they've gone out of their way to have Peely or Pele. I can't ever remember her name, but Amy Sedaris' character, have her back, twice now this season, and it just feels like connective tissue going through. And of course, Boba Fett. It just feels like we're going to end up back on Tatooine sooner than later. Um, and Dr. Mandible and be back at the cantina. Uh, but I don't know. I really, and like I said, I really do enjoy kind of the some of these returning characters and all these little aspects. I like that that Dave Filoni is actually his character is actually character, not just a one bit apart from that fun episode last season. you know uh, that he actually popped back up, and the idea of the New Republic X-wing pilots kind of being like troopers, state troopers,
Right.
crews. I kind of enjoyed that, and they didn't do anything. They didn't, and I know that can be a sensitive issue in our modern police force state now, but they didn't do anything that kind of you know uh, teetered on a reflection of our reality or anything like that. Not that I think they would go that way, but it would probably be easy to, considering how crazy things are now. But the just the idea of them like pulling someone over is enough to get the idea across. Uh, you know,
I was thinking, I hope they're not racist against frog people.
oh well, the justice for Frog Lady.
Really hoping that wasn't the direction they were going.
The hashtag justice for Frog Lady hashtag will not be used. Uh, Thankfully, maybe who knows what happens next week, but I don't think Frog Lady is gonna. I mean, who knows? Frog Lady might be like the new like female main character. Like she might be on every episode for the rest of the series. We don't know. I mean, this might be the new family dynamic. You got Mando, Frog Lady, and
And
the
slowly her
child,
children get eaten.
and she just ends up adopting the child because he ate all her children, and his their spirits live on in him. It's ridiculous, but pretty. I don't. I'm pretty confident that's not the direction the show is going to go in, but I do not know. It could be, and I don't know how our show is or how our podcast is going to go if that is the direction. I will not know how to feel, but I did. I really did enjoy this episode. I think again, a little harsh on it because just of the storytelling frustrations. But again,
Well, we're a quarter of the way through the second season.
right, and those short seasons. I mean, you've got to make stuff count. And again, like you said, we might look back, at the end of the season, it might have some little thing we didn't see happen, didn't understand the context of that makes it click, or maybe we'll feel like, oh, they could have done something more this episode when we come back. I mean, it all comes down to the context of it. Looking at it individually, it's got a lot of fun and it's got a lot of great stuff to offer, but it also is lacking of a lot of substance. So, it's kind of it's kind of hard to be too harsh on it, but I'm also not going to turn around and give it an A either. So I
Right.
feel like B plus is pretty solid grade and pretty fair for us to land on.
No, yeah, that's not a bad place for an episode to be. Obviously, it's really good. It's not the perfect version of itself, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I think we are in a similar territory. It's just that inner conversation about where are we moving. Like, is the next episode entirely going to be about rebuilding the ship?
Right.
And oh, here we're going to have an isolated adventure where he stops and tries to get parts for his ship. Because we kind of did that in the first season
Yeah.
a little bit. Like just the concept exists for the show to just stall somewhere. But when we did it in the first season, it's one of the best episodes of the show
Right.
because it actually did a lot around it. So like that's just the weighing where we're moving forward. Are we going to see more of Amy Sedaris and seeing her? Like I really enjoy the not to elaborate too much more on just her, but uh, when she's not really telling the full truth up front
Right.
on a routine basis all through this episode. It's like, is that something we're going to see developed, or is that just a funny little note in her character in this one episode?
Right.
Where she's like, oh, I just met her like 10 minutes ago, or, hey, oh, Dr. Mandible's on a roll. So you might as well put your bet down on him because he's doing so well. All these little lies, it's funny, but it's also like, is that an aspect of her character for good or for bad? It seems like she's a good person, but I guess my mind automatically goes like, what if? What if that's suggesting where she doesn't really have an allegiance and she could be helping out potentially bad people as well?
Right.
There's a lot of directions that could go, but maybe we're never going to see her again. I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard to say. We're projecting on that note, but
Who knows? Yeah.
a solid episode. We're at an interesting point in season two where who knows what we're gonna get. We know some things we're supposed to get this season, uh, and 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 maybe this is my only thought now is maybe this is like a split season where part of it is here's the Tatooine connected kind of part of the season, and we're gonna deal with Boba Fett in some way. Maybe this is all part of one smaller thing, and then we're gonna go off when he gets a connection and a hint at where to go from here, and that's when we're gonna get the Ahsoka part of the story.
Right.
It could be divided that way, like different parts of season two, but obviously no Boba in episode two. It doesn't have to be, but don't want to go too far into wondering where this is going to go.
No.
But a good episode. Let's hope we, move forward in our narrative at some point.
Yeah, it just, just to kind of get a, because at this point I'm not going to say like I feel like okay, we're just, dragging our feet, but because I mean it's only the second episode, but it's the second out of 8 episodes, so we got to get a little bit of an idea here of where we're going, and just even a decent hint next episode would be appreciated. And I do think it'll be a little more connective at this point because I feel like it has to be, but who knows? I mean, maybe it'll be a fixing the ship episode with more eggs to eat, or who knows? But I do think that we're, this point we're gonna, it's due time to have a more connective episode, with not necessarily answers, but with a little more drive in getting the story moving. But we shall see on next Friday.
We will, and that's I don't mind. Obviously, it wasn't until recent years that we had the streaming model of everything at
Right,
once. An
right.
entire season at once. But there's a tiny part of me that's like, gosh, I wish we had everything at once because it would make
Yeah,
this conversation easier in terms of, oh, I get where this is going, as opposed to the anticipation and you get to the week of and it's like, oh, and we just got a little fun adventure serial. Okay.
right.
But that's not a terrible thing. We will find out next Friday when The Mandalorian season 2 continues what exactly we're going to get. We'll have that conversation then. Until then, my friend, pleasure talking about this episode with you.
Indeed. My pleasure as always.
And see you guys next time here on TV Binge Drinking.